Welcome back. All right, it is the 32 team video for today, and today I want to focus on 32 players who are in their first seasons with new teams, and it's going to include goaltenders as well. So you can see the board. It goes from Anaheim to Calgary. I got creative with how I set this up. There is an alphabetical way I set this all up, but doesn't matter. In the end, we're starting with Anaheim. That's where we're going to start. Klingberg. So for Klingberg, when he signed there, it's a one-year deal he's on. He's now up to 7 assists in 15 games. So no goals, 7 assists in 15 games. Let me go ahead and increase the amount of space there, so it looks a little better. But yeah, Klingberg I think has been good. I do think though, I still agree with Dallas's decision to let him go and not give him that major long-term extension that he wanted. And we'll see if his play gets him a trade at, say, the deadline, and maybe he gets that big contract next year. But so far, it's been a mixed bag for him in Anaheim. Florida. With Florida, I went with Colin White. So a signing they made coming out of Ottawa, right? In White's case, so far in 14 games, 3 goals, 6 assists, 9 points. And I think he's fit in really well. The professional scouts they have for Florida, so your scouts that are looking to see which players currently on other teams, maybe in the AHL level too, could help you right now. They clearly did a good job with White. And it's possible too that it was just, they're like, well, we'll just sign White for cheap and see what happens. But I'm giving the pro scouts the benefit of the doubt that they had something to do with it, and it's worked out pretty well. White's definitely had a recovery in his offensive totals, and he's looked pretty good. For Seattle, I'm going with the one that's not getting goals yet, but he's been around the net. He's just got the 1 goal to show for it. Of course, Burakovsky's been very good for them. But I think Bjorkstrand, with 1 goal, 7 assists for 8 points in 15 games, it's easy to overlook what he's done so far for them. I think Seattle's turnaround so far, I do think Bjorkstrand's been a positive. I think he's helped. And, you know, you have that veteran in there, a guy who can score goals, and I think he'll score at a better rate than he has so far. He's not going to end up with 4 or 5 goals this year. He'll definitely end up with some. So that's good news for Seattle fans, too, is that the team's already playing pretty well, and they've got a guy in their lineup that should have about 4 or 5 goals by now that only has 1. So he's due to start getting some goals. On the Vancouver front, this is a tough one. This is a contract that got signed over the summer. Ilya Mikheyev. In 12 games, he has 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points. He's actually producing well and he's playing well, but because of that contract, there's going to be extra scrutiny on him he didn't get in Toronto based on the contract. In Toronto, he wasn't like, oh, look how much money we're paying him. There was scrutiny for other reasons. But for Mikheyev, I kind of feel bad because he got added to this team and it's just been an absolute disaster out of the gate. So I do wonder when you sign a contract with a team and you're like, cool, this should go well. And within a month of your first year there, do you realize, I probably should have stayed where I was? Like, does that happen on some level? I'd be interested to talk to players and find out. Ottawa. So for Ottawa, Claude Giroux has been a revelation. Honestly, he has. It's been a rough start for the team's year, but in 14 games, he has 7 goals to go with 8 assists for 15 points. And yeah, Giroux's playing some of the best hockey he has in years for the Ottawa Senators. The Senators in general have had trouble with closing out games and winning games on a regular basis, but Giroux has not been a problem. For the New York Rangers, the Rangers have been up and down. They currently sit, last I checked, outside of a playoff spot. Trocheck, 16 games, 5 goals, 6 assists, 11 points. I think he's produced well. He's on pace for, what, 55 points, somewhere in that region. Is there more that he can do? Yeah, absolutely. But I don't know how much blame I would throw at Trocheck for some of the down games here and there. The Rangers are just very wildly unpredictable. I use that term a lot when talking about the Rangers. It's true. For Trocheck, 55, 60 points is probably right about where he ends up. I think he's played well, but you guys can let me know your thoughts. Columbus, it kind of has to be Johnny Gaudreau, doesn't it? It kind of has to be. 14 games, 6 goals, 6 assists, 12 points. Gaudreau last year, of course, had 115 points, and right now he's on pace for a lot less than that. He may end up around the 70-point mark. That is not what Columbus was hoping they would get. And this is where it's tricky when you're getting a player who's been a producer but has only been with one organization. You never know what change is going to do. That change can lead to greater production. Look at Giroux in Ottawa. He's producing better than he did in Philly. Of course, he produced really well in Florida after the trade too. So the offense is still there. White's been good, but in Gaudreau's case, that change of scenery has not been to his benefit to this stage. Honestly, if you're watching their games, there are times where I have to kind of be like, that's the same Johnny Gaudreau from Calgary. Like it just feels odd to see him in another jersey for one, and for two, it's just something's not clicking, and that's where the chemistry part with Calgary comes in. For Colorado, first goaltender on the board. There are some goaltenders on this one. I know I often just do skaters, and then I'll do the goaltender separately. But in this case, I thought, I'll include goalies. Georgiev has been fantastic. 7-1-1 record, 924 save percentage. And then last night, Francouz had a good game, but of course, he's been a Colorado Avalanche goaltender for a while. Georgiev coming in from the Rangers, never been a starter in the NHL before. It's still early in the season, obviously. When it comes to goaltending, maybe teams don't have a book on him, this kind of thing. His numbers may come down, but I think Georgiev's played well. It's going to be the third different goaltender we've seen. First it's Grubauer, then it was Kemper, now it's Georgiev. They bring in guys who are seen as maybe middling. They end up doing pretty well, whether it was Grubauer, whether it was Kemper, and now it's Georgiev. So they do pretty well, and you can decide whether that's because the goaltenders play better or if they protect their goaltenders better. You guys can make that decision. For Arizona, I'm going with one that's interesting to me, because before the season started, it looked like he was probably done. But Valimaki has been very solid for the Arizona Coyotes. Not only does he have a goal and 4 assists for 5 points in 12 games, he's a +4. So the Calgary Flames, who cut him, right, he gets waived and goes to Arizona. I am sure with the injuries that have happened on the blue line, Calgary would love to have had him in the lineup. And I do wonder if Valimaki would have played this well if he'd stayed in Calgary. I think sometimes a player needs that change of scenery to really get himself going. And that may be the case with Valimaki. But Arizona's been quite happy with getting a guy for not much. And, I mean, just for the contract hit, right? And you get that kind of production out of him. He has really helped solidify what is an underrated blue line for the Arizona Coyotes. For the Kings. So when they traded for Fiala and they signed him to a really big contract, I said there was some risk because Fiala, you know, the points and the goals and all that, can he stay at that level? Well, in 17 games, he's got 5 goals, 11 assists, 16 points. He's dangerous player. He is a very solid overall producer. At this stage, I don't know if he's going to reach the kind of goals he had in Minnesota last year. He's only got 5 and 17 so far, but at any rate, he's around a point per game. I don't think LA is upset with it. LA currently one of the top 3 teams in the Pacific, and they seem to be getting hot at the right time. So Kevin Fiala is definitely a part of the reason that they've been turning things around recently. For St. Louis, I'm going with a goaltender here too. It's been a rough go of it for Greiss. Rough go of it for St. Louis in general, but Greiss is 0-3, .899 save percentage. This is part of the reason I say they miss Ville Husso, right? They decided they weren't going to pay Husso what he wanted. He ends up going to Detroit. They bring in Greiss as the backup. I think the plan is for Hofer to be the guy who comes in and ends up being the backup for Binnington, probably starting next season. But for Greiss, we'll see if he can turn things around. He's done it before. It wouldn't be the first time he's resurrected a season after it's been started and it's looked kind of iffy. But at .899, his save percentage isn't terrible. The 0-3 record's not great, but St. Louis has just had its problems lately. They look like they're coming out of them. Maybe Greiss will get a win his next time out. Vegas, it's a goaltender as well. And a goaltender that has forced Brossoit down to the minors, despite his paycheck being relatively high. Adin Hill, 5-1 record, .920 save percentage. And Adin Hill so far has looked very good in Vegas. And again, this speaks well to their pro scouts. Vegas has had good pro scouts their entire existence. It's part of the reason that they've been able to stay at the top of the league. They just know who to pick up from where and when to do it. Now, the salary cap gymnastics are always a thing. I think they could work on resolving that so they don't have a salary gymnastics problem every year. But that being said, Hill was a very solid addition, and Brossoit is now down in Henderson. They've got 3 NHL-level goaltenders. There aren't a lot of teams that can say that. Boston comes to mind as one because of Kincaid last night. There are a few others, but having 3 goaltenders, especially with the way goaltenders get hurt these days, it can't hurt. Philadelphia, For Philadelphia, I'm going with a guy who was in a fight in today's game, D'Angelo. For D'Angelo, or no, it was yesterday's game he got in a fight. Today there weren't any fights in that game against Dallas. In 15 games for D'Angelo, 3 goals, 6 assists, 9 points. I think he's fit in well. I don't know that he's having the same kind of year he did in Carolina last year. I think that was kind of a perfect setup. But he's still playing well enough, and I don't think Philadelphia regrets that signing. There are probably some moves Philadelphia regrets. I don't think D'Angelo is one of them. Islanders. For the Islanders, defensemen, and they didn't add very many. So for the Islanders, it's Romanov, who has 4 assists in 16 games, plays a heavy game. And I think he's been serviceable. I am still surprised Montreal just gave him up. Although, when you look at what Jack Guy's doing for Montreal right now, that might have contributed to them saying, we're going to trade Romanov. Because, yeah, Jack Guy's been fantastic, playing a similar role to Romanov, but he's just so big and strong. Jack Guy, if you haven't watched Jack Guy play, you're missing out. I would say, watch a Montreal game and just see what Jack Guy does. Which reminds me, none of these are going to be rookies. These are guys who've changed teams, not rookies. We'll do a rookie video at some point soon when I do a 32-team video. For Dallas, player who started off hot has cooled off. Absolutely has cooled off. Mason Marchment, who in 15 games, 4 goals, 4 assists thus far. But he's physical, he's fast, good player, good two-way player. The scoring's a bonus, yes. Has he lived up to his contract? Yeah, I would say so. I think Dallas is pretty happy. They're currently 9-5-1. And Marchment's definitely been a part of how the team's got off to a good start in Dallas. So it's been a good fit. Chicago. For Chicago, you know, I feel bad for Mrazek. Mrazek gets to go and play in Chicago after, you know, Toronto wanted to make a change in net. Mrazek 1-1-1 with an .895 save percentage. I honestly think he's played all right. I'm not going to say he's played fantastic. I think Soderblom's been the one that's played better. But Mrazek's been good. And I think Mrazek will, if he can keep playing the way he did in his last game, which was the first one back from injury, I think he'll increase his stock price so that maybe at the deadline another team looking to be in the same situation as Vegas where they'd have 3 NHL-level goaltenders might add Mrazek. And again, at the trade deadline, we'll see what kind of cap gymnastics get done by teams then. But don't be too surprised if there are teams who are trying to pick up their version of a Louis Domingue, their version of a Keith Kincaid, somebody who can come in as a number 3 and you're not worried about it. He's got NHL experience. For Boston, Pavel Zacha, 15 games, 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 points. Zacha's a good player. He is. And on that line with Pastrnak and Krejci, he's been a good producer. I do think sometimes he gets overrated, and I thought when Boston made that trade, there was a lot of talk of, wow, Boston really ripped them off, and I thought, well, I mean, yeah, a little. I mean, Howle's bounced around the league, but Howle's still serviceable. Howle's been good for New Jersey as well. I think the trades worked out all right for both of them. Zacha probably has a little bit more to offer, but around a point every other game is probably where it's going to end up for him this year, and I think that's fine. You know, it's fine. He's not hurting them. I think he's been all right. Minnesota, Steele. Minnesota didn't add a ton of players in the offseason either. So in Steele's case, 14 games, 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points. I don't know that Steele has done enough for Minnesota that he's going to be in their lineup for a long time to come. I think for Steele, he has to be a little more prominent, definitely needs to get some more points if he wants to make sure he still has a job with Minnesota, say, into next season. So I was hoping for a comeback. I rooted for him when he was in Anaheim. I'm still rooting for him, but I do think that these numbers tell me he's probably not going to end up staying in Minnesota that long. And then what happens from there, we shall see. Tampa Bay. This guy got off to a good start. He did. But it is a depth move at this point. And again, Tampa Bay didn't add a lot either. But Nemesnikov in 14 games, 3 assists. And it is a matter of he only has the 3 points in 14 games. I don't think he's hurt them either. So for Nemesnikov, it's been a homecoming for Tampa. I don't know how long he stays either, though. I would not be entirely surprised if around trade deadline time we see Nemesnikov being moved out. He's a journeyman, and that's how that works with journeymen, is they end up getting traded often. Think like Derek Brassard with Ottawa. How long is it before Brassard gets moved off? And is Brassard a threat to reach Sillinger's 12-team mark? He might be. He's not on the board here. He's played relatively well for Ottawa, but we'll see. And for Nemestikov, maybe he ends up in Ottawa. He's gone to Ottawa. Has he gone to Ottawa before? I don't know. He's been around a lot of teams, so maybe. I think I have like a 1 in 4 chance of being right about him being with any team in the league. Washington, going with a goaltender here. What's interesting is, for Kemper, he's got a 5-6-1 record, which is not great, but his .920 save percentage is excellent. So that tells you that Kemper's playing well. The team in front of him hasn't played as well as he has, but he's giving them the goaltending they need to win. So if the puck starts going in the other net a little bit more often, Washington has the goaltending to turn this season around. They're 7-7-2. As long as they stay around that 500 mark, they just need a 4 or 5 game winning streak. They can then start to pull themselves into a spot that they're above that playoff line and making teams chase them. Pittsburgh. I think it's been a mixed bag with Petrie thus far. Petrie had a bit of a slow start. I think he's picked it up over the last couple. 15 games, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points. He had a good game against Montreal, which should surprise no one. Guys often have good games against the team that traded him. So for Petrie, he is looking for a big bounce-back season. Pittsburgh, of course, with the revamped blue line, hoping to get themselves into a contender spot. Currently, that looks unlikely. They're 6-6-3, I do believe. But, yeah, Petrie, I think, has been better over the last few games, trending in the right direction. I think Pittsburgh's trending back in the right direction as well. They're undefeated in regulation in their last 3, so I think it will get better. For New Jersey, one of the reasons that the New Jersey Devils have become kind of a juggernaut early in the season is their blue line, and John Marino has played a role in that. In 15 games, 1 goal, 6 assists, 7 points. And he does a little bit of everything. The offense is not what was expected before he reached the NHL, but defensively he's been very good, and the points have started to come lately. So the 6 assists, the 7 points in 15 games, the offense is starting to show up. And, I mean, Marino's never going to be in the running for a Norris Trophy, but he is absolutely one of the reasons that the New Jersey Devils have turned things around. That trade has worked out very well for New Jersey. Pittsburgh, with their revamped blue line, it's been a mixed bag so far. I would say New Jersey's absolutely won that deal thus far. For Detroit, it's got to be the ridiculousness that is Kubalik. And as somebody who has been of the belief that Kubalik sometimes doesn't get the respect he deserves, I don't think he necessarily had that in Chicago. In 15 games for Detroit, he has 7 goals, 11 assists, 18 points. How does this happen? Like it feels weird to see Kubalik with that many points in that few games. I'm happy for him. I do wonder how long that can go on, but you know, while it's happening, when a guy's having a career year, you just kind of stand back and go, all right, and that's what a career year looks like. It's out of whack with the rest of their seasons, and in this case, Kubalik's just fitting in really well in Detroit, and good on him. For Carolina, so remember with Stastny, a lot was made of him being signed by Carolina, but he's in his mid-30s, and he has 4 assists in 14 games, and it's interesting to see when somebody's production starts to fall off a bit and they're getting older, how quickly that can happen. And in the case of Stastny, the 4 assists in 14 games. I don't know, I was going to say 17, but I was going to say 17. But 4 assists in 14 games for Stastny is definitely below what I think he would have wanted to produce thus far. Carolina's had some problems with scoring this season thus far, if you look at them comparatively speaking with other top teams in the league. And if Stastny can get things going, that would help them out a lot. Now we get to Buffalo. So for Buffalo, let me just line these up a little bit better. There we go. I'm going to go with, because really they stayed with a lot of the same people they had last year. But Comrie was added in net. Thus far for Comrie, 4-6, 885 save percentage. It was Anderson, of course, last night against Boston. Comrie's been the starter for a lot of their games. His numbers aren't as good as they were in Winnipeg, but of course for Buffalo, they've got some key defensemen that have been hurt over the last couple of weeks that are definitely affecting the goals against. Once they've got a healthy blue line again, it should help Comrie's numbers. But again, if your Buffalo has Comrie become that go-to guy that, and I know it's early, but you always think, so going forward into future seasons, is this guy going to be on the team? And with Comrie, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to be. Buffalo's gone through a lot of goaltenders over the last, decade? So it's possible that Comrie becomes another guy who comes and then goes, or maybe he gets it together. Maybe they have faith in him and they keep him around. We'll see. For Montreal, I've always been a big fan of Kirby Dach. I was very surprised Chicago got rid of him. In 15 games, he has 4 goals, 10 assists, 14 points. Kirby Dach has been the third guy on that line with Suzuki and Caulfield, and that line might be good enough to drag Montreal into a wild card spot. Absolutely could happen, and the reason I say that is because I watched Dallas last year with Robertson, Hintz, and Pavelski. When that line suddenly had everything going, good luck stopping them. And Montreal has some of that same energy, and Kirby Dach is a beneficiary of that. And the fact that he's up near a point per game, good. I've always thought Dach had a really good game in there. He's had a rough couple of years in Chicago, and clearly the air in Montreal is agreeing with him quite well. Glad to see him up near a point per game. For Toronto, not a ton of guys to go with Toronto. And I mean, we talk about their goaltending a lot. So I'm going to talk about Calle Järnkrok. Who in 16 games, 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points. Good depth scoring. Toronto's definitely a team that has to watch their depth scoring, because in the East, I still expect Toronto to be a playoff team, but if they're going to get over that hump in the playoffs, it's going to be the depth scoring. It's going to be your goaltending, of course, has to be solid, and your blue line has to be able to hold back some of the bigger names in the East. But guys like Järnkrok, you might need a big goal in a game, and it might be a depth guy who gets it, and maybe Järnkrok will be that guy for Toronto. It is definitely one of those things that they've been lacking in terms of their playoff experience, where they usually get knocked out in the first round. And by usually, I mean ever since 2004. And I want that storyline to change too. I absolutely do. Winnipeg, I'm going to think outside the box here, because they did not make big changes. But one that I like, bringing in Menelainen. Menelainen in 13 games, just 1 goal and 1 assist. Not spectacular. But his bottom 6 play, his checking, and just in recent games for Winnipeg, he's been quite prominent. It doesn't show up on the score sheet. A lot of the things Menelainen does, they don't show up on the score sheet, so he's valuable. He also is a player that at some point in time, Winnipeg might say, well, we want to upgrade the bottom 6. And so, you could see a situation where Menelainen becomes the guy that ends up being moved to make room for somebody else. But that being said, he is playing very well right now. And you wouldn't know by watching him this year in Winnipeg that he had missed any time in the NHL at all. That he had played overseas. I think he was gone for like 2-3 years. And I remember him being an RFA holdout, just kind of was forgotten. But he was an RFA holdout years back. San Jose. For San Jose, I went with... I wanted this to be a huge bounce-back season for Lindblom. It has not happened. 15 games, no goals, 4 assists. And there are a lot of games of San Jose's where he's just not that prominent. He's not at the net enough. And so, yeah, Philadelphia didn't keep him around. And I'd really hope that he'd be a feel-good story for the San Jose Sharks this year. There's still a lot of time. It's not like San Jose's a team that's in the playoffs, and so they're going to be cutting ice time for guys because they're trying to... He's going to get his opportunities. Goals should start going in for him, but thus far, it has not been a great year for Lindblom. For Nashville, now, this is a player that has just recently joined their roster. And when he was signed, I don't think any of us expected anything out of Jankowski because of the most recent seasons in his career. But in 5 games for Nashville, he has 2 goals and an assist, and he's looked good. Watching a couple of those Nashville games, I've been like, okay, this Mark Jankowski, we haven't seen him since his 17-goal season in Calgary, which was a while ago. Can he hold this up? So he has 2 goals in 5 games. If he can keep producing 2 goals every 5 games, he's probably going to stay in the lineup, and he's going to surprise some people because he's bounced around the league a little bit himself. It'd be nice to see him grow roots and stay in Nashville, and he might very well fit into that roster or onto that roster better than he has with teams previously. That does happen, and that could be the case with Jankowski. For Edmonton, it has to be Campbell, doesn't it? It kind of has to be. We've discussed with Campbell. and I was charitable early in the season that it's early. Let's not talk about him being a sieve and all this other discussion. 6-4 record, that's good. 873 save percentage is not. So for Campbell, he really needs to get this going because Skinner is stealing his job. Skinner's absolutely stealing his job. And again, if you're an Oilers fan, are you comfortable with Skinner as the starter for a full season, especially if you want to win a Stanley Cup? Or do you want them to get Campbell going? And they need to balance that, right? You need to win games now. So you go with the better goaltender right now, who is Skinner. But you need to get Campbell going as well. So I would think a lot of extra work for him with goalie coaches and whatnot to try to get him right and get him going in the right direction. But right now, Campbell's numbers have been pretty bad. And I understand the blue line in front of him hasn't been great, but the numbers for Skinner are much better. We have the discussions as well on this channel about how starters get the tougher team or the tougher challenges in terms of opposition than the backups. And that can be true. But in some cases, the backup's just playing better, and I think that's the case in Edmonton. It's been the case in Vancouver, too, where Demko just hasn't been playing as well, and so now Martin's going to get more starts, but they're still losing those games. So we'll see how things go for Edmonton. They've got to get things going with Campbell. He signed for a while. And then we finished things off with Calgary. With Calgary, I wanted to talk about somebody who I have not talked about at all this year. I'm kind of surprised, and that's Kevin Rooney, who just has 1 assist in 13 games. When they picked up Rooney, I thought, he's going to fit right in with that bottom 6 for Calgary. He's a good physical guy. He can put the puck in the net here and there. And I thought it would work. And so far, it's just not clicking. He's just got the 1 assist in 13 games. I do think he's going to get a couple of goals sooner or later. But is it going to be sooner or is it going to be later? And is it going to be in Calgary or is it going to be in somewhere else? So there you go. 32 players on new teams and how they're doing thus far. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.